Now let us work with pivot tables. Well, we did work on pivot tables during the basic Excel program, but in this session, we will explore some advanced and cool features associated with pivot tables. So to begin with, we have some data over here that's about the global sales of a company that sells lamps. Now these lamps have been broadly categorized under LEDs, CFL, and FL. When you say FL, that means fluorescent light. Now let us get started and quickly create our first pivot table from this data. I can click anywhere on this table or maybe select the entire range of this table till the last row. It's a large set of data and will be quite an interesting case to work with for our pivot table. We go to Insert menu, select Pivot Table. Now we have the entire range selected. In case if there is any error, you can anytime wipe this out, clear this out, and select again. Now let's click on New Worksheet. OK. And here we have. Now here first I would like to have region and then country as the second row heading. And then we want transaction date as a column heading and then amount and values. Well, that's pretty much done with this. Well, in case if you do not see these transaction dates grouped as months and instead you see it in the form of days, don't worry. Just right click here and click on group. You have the starting and the ending date range. This is generally the upper limit and lower limit picked up by Excel from the data. Now here you can see that it's being grouped by months and then next level by days. Now I do not want it by days, so I can uncheck it by just click on days. It's unchecked. Well, in case if I want quarterly, I can select quarters. If I do not want, I can uncheck it. For now, let's leave it to months. Let's select it, click OK. Now let's do a basic formatting of this data. I would like to see the thousand separator over here. So I have Control Shift exclamation as a keyboard shortcut. But then again, I need to remove the decimals which are not required. Now let us adjust the width of these columns. We select the columns, double click on one of the borders, and here we have them adjusted. Now I see that there are a couple of blank cells over here, which means Indonesia. There was no business or sales in Indonesia, Malaysia, Mongolia, and Philippines in the month of December. Now when it comes to Australia and New Zealand, there is absolutely zero sales in the first 3 months. Probably because the business had just started in the month of October, so that's the reason there weren't any sales. And here in Hungary, no sales in the month of November and December and so on. But it would be better if I could just have a zero in place rather than the blank cells. Now just because the records do not exist for Indonesia for the month of December, they are appearing blank. But I would prefer them to be a zero. So right click on any of the cells, go to Pivot Table Options. Under Layouts and Format tab, we have For Empty Cell Shows. Ensure that this is checked. For Empty Cells Show, I want to show a 0. Well, in case if there isn't any sufficient data, you might also want to show an NA, and that's absolutely fine. But I would prefer to have a 0 in this case, and click OK. Here we have this, all the zeros in place instead of the blank cells. Now, while we're at this, you can also rearrange the rows over here. For example, you have Asia Pacific, India first, and then everything arranged alphabetically here. But what if one of the key regions that you want to focus is also Singapore? So India and then Indonesia, and then you want to have Singapore third. So click on Singapore, move your mouse to the border and drag it up. And you see the entire record moves up. Here, this way we can rearrange it. Now Malaysia, I would have it in the last in the list because now I have it pretty much as the key regions which gave the most amount of business, and Malaysia, I was not able to get that much of business. This is probably to do with the fact that we are still expanding there and exploring the geography. Sooner or later, Malaysia would also start generating revenues for us. Sooner or later, the company will also start generating good revenues from Malaysia as well. Now, here we can arrange alphabetically. By default, everything is arranged alphabetically, but yes, you have the liberty to shuffle the order. Now, let's say they're already in the form of groups. Here you have the region, and under each region, you have the countries. Now, let's say I want to have another grouping over here. That is, I want to club Asia Pacific and Australia into one. So how do I do that? I'll select these two and right click. You can select these and right click and click group. So there is group 1 here. I can change, instead of group 1, I can rename this, but if I'm double clicking, it's collapsing. So it's contracting. So let's keep this as it is. I can anytime change the name from here. I say region 1. Similarly, I would like to have Middle East and Africa as region 2. But now you see, we have Middle East and then North America and then rest of Africa. So there is no way that we can select them and then click group. I select this, I hold down the control key and select Middle East. Now right click and select group, it will. Okay. It did work. So here we have group 2. Now let's say I want to move group 2 up. So I'll move my mouse to the edge and just take it up. After group region 1, I have it over here. And here instead of group 2, I'll call it as region 2. So in this way, we can have multiple levels of grouping as well. And then so we have region 1. Maybe we just want one quick glance on these regions, and then region 2, another quick glance. But when it comes to Europe and Latin America and North America, I would want to have them standing out because there is a different discussion on agenda. So now while we do have one pivot table over here, I would like to also try a different pivot table. And I would like to see how many transactions happened based on the range we specified for the amounts. Let me show you one. For this, first we'll click here and go to Insert. I have the region selected, the entire table selected, new worksheet, click OK. And here we have, now this time, I want to have transaction amount as a row heading. But here I do not want this numbers appearing separately, but I want them to appear in group as in a range. So I'll right click on this, select group, and here it says starting at and ending at. So Excel by default picks up the upper limit and the lower limit and by how much. Here, let's say all these amounts are in thousands, right? So let's say I want this to be segregated with a gap of 100,000. Or so I just click OK. Well, in case 100,000 is not a good idea, you can anytime come back and change this to, let's say, 50,000 or 10,000. But let me show you what happens now. If by default, if it is selected to 100,000, I click OK. You see the range? That's the lower limit, 108,882 to 208,881. That's a span of 100,000. And we have the range. Now, I want the amount again in values. And this time, it's the count that it is showing here. That's, I have 143 sales transactions, which were in the range of 108,000 to 108,882 and 208,881. And then we have 36 transactions that falls within the range of 408 to 882 to 508, 881. All right. So that's another interesting way of how you can get your ranges over here. Okay.